So 3 years ago, I left a man who made me sing Disney songs while he pinned my wrists above my head. And last week, I saw his wedding announcement. His new wife's hair dyed platinum blonde, their baby daughter named Elsa. I need to explain how it started because it didn't start like that. It started when I was 18, and the boy every girl wanted somehow chose me. He had blonde hair and an athlete's build, the kind of easy confidence that made you feel lucky just to be noticed. We'd been in the same social circle for years, but when he finally asked me out, I thought I'd won something. Our friends said we were perfect together. My parents loved him. We'd hold hands at the movies and kiss in his car after dates. And I remember thinking this was exactly what love was supposed to feel like: safe, exciting, like the beginning of a story I already knew the ending to. So I'm going to tell you about the night he suggested we see Frozen for date night, and how I thought it was sweet when his eyes lit up during Let It Go. How the changes crept in so slowly I didn't recognize them until I was wearing costumes and reciting lines while the movie played on repeat. And what I found the night he showed me a Pinterest board labeled Our Future Family, because what he'd been researching behind my back made me realize he'd never been looking at me at all. He'd been looking straight through me at something I could never become. I stare at the wedding photo on my phone for 20 minutes before my hands start shaking so badly I have to put it down. 3 years of therapy, 3 years of rebuilding myself, and one Instagram post from a mutual friend destroys my carefully constructed calm in seconds. The bride's hair is so blonde it's almost white, styled in an elaborate braid over one shoulder. Their baby girl sits between them in a tiny ice blue dress, her wispy hair already platinum. And the caption reads, "Our little Elsa finally got to meet Olaf at Disney." I set my phone face down on the coffee table and press my palms against my thighs to stop the trembling. My apartment feels too small suddenly, the walls pressing in like they're trying to squeeze the air from my lungs. I pick up my phone again, unlock it, stare at the photo for another 5 minutes until my vision blurs. The baby looks maybe 4 months old, which means his new wife got pregnant pretty fast after their wedding. Or maybe before. I zoom in on the little girl's face and feel sick because she's perfect for him in a way I never could have been. I call in sick to work and spend the day on my couch, trying to remember when it started feeling wrong. My therapist Chase always says I need to stop protecting him in my memories. Stop making excuses for the early days like they were separate from what came after. But that's the thing about how it happened. The beginning really was different. Or at least it felt different, and I keep trying to figure out when the shift occurred. When the boy I thought I loved turned into someone I didn't recognize. I pull a blanket over my legs even though it's not cold and open my phone to that photo again. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. To when I was 18, and he was the boy every girl in our town wanted. I'm going to tell the truth about how it felt to be, was chosen by someone that perfect, and how that feeling became the trap. We'd known each other since middle school, running in the same church youth group circles, but he never really looked at me until senior year. He had blonde hair that fell perfectly across his forehead, the kind of athletic build that came from actual sports rather than gym obsession, and this easy confidence that made everyone lean in when he talked. I was average in every way that mattered back then. Brown hair, brown eyes, decent grades, a few close friends but not popular. I sat 3 rows behind him in youth group every Wednesday, and watched him joke with the other guys. Watched girls find excuses to talk to him after the session ended. When he asked me to go see a movie after youth group one Wednesday, I actually checked behind me to make sure he was talking to me. My best friend grabbed my arm so hard she left marks, whispering, "Oh my God, say yes," like I might be stupid enough to refuse. I said yes, trying to sound casual like boys asked me out all the time, like this wasn't the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me. That first date was normal in every way that mattered. We saw some action movie I can't even remember, shared popcorn, and he held my hand during the scary parts. He kissed me in his car afterward, sweet and tentative, and asked if he could take me to dinner that Friday. I floated through the rest of that week, texting him constantly, telling my friends every detail of our conversations. My parents loved him immediately because his family was prominent in our church. His dad was a lawyer and his mom volunteered for every charity event. They never saw how his mother's smile never reached her eyes, or how his father's compliments always had sharp edges hidden inside them. I met his parents that first Friday when he picked me up for dinner. His mother looked me up and down with this measuring expression, then told me I had a lovely figure. But maybe his father shook my hand too hard and said I seemed like a nice girl, emphasis on the word nice in a way that made it sound like an insult. For the first few months, everything felt like the teenage romance I'd watched in movies. He'd pick me up for school, we'd study together at the coffee shop, and our friends constantly told us we were the perfect couple. I felt lucky, chosen, like I'd won something everyone else wanted. My parents would smile when he came to pick me up. My friends would give me knowing looks when he'd drape his arm around my shoulders in the hallway. Looking back now, I can see the small things I dismissed. How he always chose what we watched, where we ate, what we did, but he was so nice about it that disagreeing felt ungrateful. How he'd compliment my appearance but always with a suggestion attached, telling me I looked pretty but maybe I should wear my hair down more, or that dress was nice but blue would look better on me. I teased him about wanting to see a Disney princess movie when he brought up Frozen in November. We'd been together 4 months by then, and I thought I knew his taste in entertainment pretty well. Action movies, sports games, occasionally a comedy if our friends picked it. But he got this look when I made the joke. Excited but nervous at the same time. Like he wanted something, but wasn't sure he was allowed to have it. He told me his parents never let him watch stuff like that growing up. Anything they called childish or beneath him. He said he wanted to see what he'd missed, and the way he said it made me feel like I'd be mean to refuse. So I agreed, thinking it was kind of sweet that he trusted me enough to admit he wanted to see a cartoon about singing princesses. I spent more time watching him than the screen during that movie. His whole face changed during the songs, especially when the blonde princess sang about being herself and not hiding anymore. He grabbed my hand so tight during the sad parts that my fingers went numb, and when the credits rolled, he just sat there staring at the screen like he didn't want to leave. In the car driving home, he hummed the melodies under his breath, and I reached over and squeezed his hand because it made me happy to see him enjoying something so purely, without worrying what anyone else thought. I remember thinking this was what being in a good relationship meant, supporting each other's interests even when they surprised you. The next day, he bought the soundtrack and started playing it every time we drove anywhere. Our friends made jokes about it when they rode with us, but he'd just laugh and say the music was actually really good, like he was daring them to disagree. I backed him up because the songs were catchy and the story was about empowerment and sisterhood, things I believed in. Plus, seeing him happy about something made me happy too, even if I thought he was taking it a bit far when he started playing the same songs on repeat. But everyone has their thing, right? Some guys are obsessed with sports teams or video games. If his thing was a Disney movie soundtrack, that seemed harmless enough. 2 weeks later, we were getting ready for a date, and he asked if I'd ever thought about braiding my hair like the characters. I laughed because my hair was dark brown, almost black, and the princess had platinum blonde hair that practically glowed. I pointed out the obvious difference, but he said he just meant the braid style, not the color. So I looked up a tutorial and tried to copy the pattern, this elaborate side braid that took me 3 tries to get right. He watched me do it with this focus that felt strange, like he was memorizing every movement of my hands. When I finished, he stared at me for a long moment without saying anything, and I asked if it looked okay. He said it looked perfect, but the way he said perfect made my stomach feel weird in a way I couldn't explain. Christmas came and he gave me a jewelry box that felt too heavy when I picked it up. Inside were at least a dozen pieces, all silver, all with this ice theme going on. Snowflake earrings so detailed they must have cost a fortune. A pendant shaped like an ice crystal on a delicate chain. Rings with pale blue stones that caught the light. Everything sparkled like actual ice, and I told him it was way too much, that he shouldn't have spent this kind of money. But he insisted he wanted to see me wear them, that he'd picked each piece specifically for me. His mother noticed at Christmas dinner when I wore some of it, and she made this comment about everything being matchy-matchy, in that tone that sounded like a compliment but felt like criticism. His dad just looked at me and then at his son with this expression I couldn't read. January started with him asking me to wear the silver jewelry whenever we went out together. Not demanding it exactly, more like he'd suggest it and then look disappointed if I forgot or chose different earrings. His whole mood would shift, getting flat and distant until I made some excuse to go back inside and put on the pieces he wanted. I told myself it made him happy, and the jewelry really was pretty, so what did it matter if I wore what he liked? Couples do things to make each other happy all the time. My mom always wore the perfume my dad bought her even though she preferred a different scent. This was basically the same thing, just jewelry instead of perfume. He bought me makeup in February, specific shades he'd picked out himself. Purple eyeshadow in this shade I never would have chosen. Kind of dark and dramatic. He asked me to wear it on our next date, and I did, because saying no felt harder than just putting it on. He stared at my eyes all through dinner with this satisfied look, like I'd finally gotten something right that I'd been doing wrong before. He took pictures of me that night, dozens of them, always adjusting my hair or telling me to tilt my head a different way until the angle was exactly what he wanted. I smiled in all of them because that's what you do when your boyfriend takes your picture, but looking at them later, I barely recognized myself. We started being close in a physical way that same month, and I noticed he always wanted the movie playing in the background. At first it seemed quirky, kind of romantic even, like we had our own special thing that other couples didn't have. He'd whisper lyrics during it, matching his movements to the rhythm of the songs, and I'd giggle because it was so unexpected and strange. I thought he was just being playful, making our private moments unique and memorable. The music became this soundtrack to our relationship. Always there, always the same songs in the same order. The first time he whispered the main song's title when he finished, I actually laughed out loud because it caught me so off guard. He smiled at my reaction, but there was something in his eyes that I didn't understand then. Something hungry and satisfied at the same time. Something that needed me to think it was funny, to accept it as normal and cute instead of weird. So I did accept it, filing it away as just another quirky thing about him, another way our relationship was special and different from everyone else's boring, normal relationships. By March, every single date involved watching that movie. If I suggested we see something else at the theater or rent a different film, he'd get quiet and withdrawn. Not angry, never yelling or making a scene. Just emotionally absent, sometimes for days at a time. He'd respond to my text with one-word answers, and when we were together, he'd be physically present but mentally somewhere else. It always lasted until I apologized and suggested we watch what he wanted, and then he'd come back to me like flipping a switch, suddenly warm and affectionate again. I started just agreeing to watch it from the beginning, because the silent treatment hurt worse than sitting through the same movie one more time. He started showing me pictures on his phone while we drove around, actresses with hair so light it almost looked white against their skin. He'd hold the screen up at stoplights and ask what I thought about this shade or that one, and I'd say they looked nice because they did look nice. But then he'd get this faraway look in his eyes and say, yeah, they really do look good. And the way he said it made my stomach feel tight. He wasn't asking what I thought anymore after the first few times. He was showing me something he wanted, waiting for me to understand without him having to say it out loud. The pictures started appearing more often. Always blonde hair, always pale and icy looking, and he'd zoom in on the color and ask if I noticed how pretty it was. I noticed how he never showed me pictures of actresses who looked like me anymore. April came and we were sitting in his car after a movie when he turned to me with this serious expression. He said he wanted to talk about something important, something that would make him really happy. My heart started beating fast because I thought he might say he loved me, might say something about our future together. Instead, he asked if I would bleach my hair blonde for him. Not suggested it, not hinted around it, just asked straight out like, of course I would do this. I must have looked surprised because he immediately started talking about all the things he did for me, how he drove me everywhere and bought me things and spent all his time with me. He said he loved me so much and this one thing would make him so happy, and didn't I want to make him happy? The way he looked at me made me feel like saying no would mean I didn't love him enough, didn't care about his feelings, was being selfish. So I said, okay, I'd do it, and he grabbed my hand and smiled so big I felt relieved, even though my stomach still felt wrong. I made an appointment at a hair salon the next week and sat in the chair while the hairdresser looked at my dark brown hair and frowned. She said going from this dark to platinum blonde would take multiple sessions, probably 3 or 4 at least, and it would damage my hair pretty badly. She suggested we try a lighter brown first, ease into it, but I shook my head and said I needed it blonde. She asked if I was sure and I said yes even though I wasn't sure at all, even though the thought of disappointing him made my stomach hurt worse than the thought of ruined hair. She mixed the bleach and started applying it and I watched in the mirror as she painted the chemicals onto section after section. The smell burned my nose and made my eyes water. After she rinsed it out and dried my hair, I looked in the mirror and wanted to cry. My hair was this terrible brassy orange-brown color, like rust or old pennies, nothing like the ice white he wanted. The hairdresser said this was normal for the first session, that we'd get it lighter next time, but I just paid her and left feeling sick. He picked me up outside the salon and I got in the car without looking at him. He didn't say anything for a full minute, just stared at my hair, and then he started the car and drove me home in complete silence. I tried to explain that it would take more sessions, that this was just the first step, but he wouldn't respond. He dropped me off without saying goodbye and didn't answer my text that night. The next day, he still wouldn't answer, and the day after that. 3 entire days of nothing. Of me texting and calling and getting silence back. Of me lying in bed feeling like I'd broken something I couldn't fix. When he finally texted back, all he said was that he needed time to process his disappointment in me. I cried so hard I threw up, thinking I'd ruined everything, thinking he might leave me over hair color. I made another appointment for the next week and told the hairdresser to do whatever she had to do to get it blonder. 2 more sessions and my hair was finally a honey blonde color. Lighter than before, but still not that ice-white platinum he'd shown me in pictures. Each session made my hair feel worse, dry and stiff like straw, and pieces started breaking off when I brushed it. But I went to see him with hope that this would be good enough, that he'd be happy now. He looked at my hair for a long time and then said, "It's better, I guess," in this flat tone that made clear it wasn't actually better at all. He pulled up more pictures on his phone, showing me even lighter shades, asking why the hairdresser couldn't get it this white. My hair was breaking off in chunks now, coming out on my pillow and clogging the shower drain, but he just kept showing me pictures of whiter and whiter blonde shades like my hair's damage didn't matter at all. May brought a shopping trip I didn't know we were going on until he picked me up and drove to the mall. He took me into stores I usually avoided because the clothes were too expensive and too revealing, and he started pulling things off racks without asking what I liked. An ice blue top made of thin material that would cling to everything, white shorts that barely covered anything, more silver jewelry to match what he'd already given me. He handed me the pile and pointed to the dressing room, then sat on the bench outside to wait. I changed into the outfit feeling exposed and uncomfortable, nothing like my usual style of loose jeans and regular t-shirts. But when I came out and showed him, his whole face changed. He smiled bigger than he had in weeks, stood up and walked around me looking at every angle and said I looked perfect. That smile made me feel like I'd finally done something right. Like maybe all the hair damage and uncomfortable changes were worth it if they made him this happy. He asked me to leave the outfit at his apartment so I'd have it there when I visited. At first it seemed practical, like keeping a toothbrush at his place, just couple stuff. But then every time I came over he'd ask me to change into it, and it started feeling less like convenience and more like a requirement. I'd show up in my normal clothes and he'd get this look on his face and I'd know I needed to go change before anything else could happen. He started doing my makeup himself before we were intimate, his hands actually shaking with excitement as he applied purple eyeshadow and pale lipstick. He'd make me sit still while he worked, taking forever to get everything exactly right, and I'd watch his face in the mirror and see how focused he was. Not on me exactly, but on creating something. Like I was a project he was completing. Summer turned everything into a performance I didn't remember agreeing to participate in. Every time we were intimate, he wanted me in the outfit with the makeup done right, and my hair braided exactly the way he'd shown me. Frozen had to be playing on his TV, always the same movie, and he'd pause it at certain songs. He'd wait for me to sing along with the music while we were together, and if I didn't sing or got the words wrong, he'd stop everything and make me start over. I learned every word to every song just to avoid disappointing him, and I'd hear my voice singing about letting go and being free while he held me exactly how he wanted me positioned. The irony didn't escape me even then, but I pushed the thought away because thinking about it too hard made me feel crazy. I started watching myself from outside my body during those times, like I was floating up near the ceiling looking down at some girl who looked like me but wasn't really me. I'd hear my voice singing Let It Go and wonder who that person was, why she was doing this, how she'd ended up here in a costume singing cartoon songs during sex. But afterward, he'd hold me so gently and tell me he loved me, and I'd come back into my body and convince myself I was overreacting. Lots of couples had their special things, their private games that would seem weird to outsiders but were just theirs. This was just our thing, just something that made him happy, and making your boyfriend happy was what good girlfriends did. I told myself this over and over until I almost believed it. My friends started making comments about how I seemed different, quieter than I used to be. One of them pulled me aside after youth group and asked if everything was okay with him, if he was treating me right. I immediately got defensive and started listing all the ways he was perfect, how he bought me jewelry and took me on dates and told me he loved me. I talked about how lucky I was that he chose me, how other girls would kill to be in my position. She looked at me with this worried expression and said, "Okay, but I could talk to her if I ever needed to." I left feeling angry at her for implying something was wrong, but also feeling scared because some part of me knew she'd seen something I was trying not to see. I was trying to convince her everything was fine, but really I was trying to convince myself. In July, he started making excuses whenever our friends invited us places. He'd tell me he had a headache or was too tired or just wanted to spend time alone with me instead of going to parties or movie nights with the group. At first, I thought it was sweet that he preferred my company, that he wanted our relationship to be special and separate from everyone else. But then my best friend texted asking if I was mad at her because I'd turned down the last 5 invitations to hang out, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen anyone without him there too. When friends called, he'd sit next to me listening to every word, and I started feeling weird about making plans without checking with him first. Eventually, I just stopped responding to group texts, because explaining why I couldn't come felt harder than saying nothing at all. My friends quit asking after a while, and suddenly his apartment was the only place I ever went besides home and school. We'd spend entire weekends there watching Frozen on repeat, and I'd look at my phone seeing messages from people I used to talk to every day, but responding felt like it would upset him somehow, so I just let them pile up unread. That summer, he showed me a package that arrived at his apartment, this big box from some online costume store. He pulled out a dress that looked exactly like the ice dress from the movie, complete with the sparkly blue fabric and the long sheer cape that dragged on the floor. He held it up against me with his hands shaking and asked if I'd wear it for him, just to see how it looked. The dress came with a wig too, this long platinum blonde wig styled in the exact braid from the movie, because my honey blonde hair still wasn't light enough for what he wanted. I stood there holding this costume and wig, and something about his face made me too scared to say no. He wasn't asking anymore, not really, even though his words sounded like a question. I told him okay, and he smiled so big, but his eyes had this hungry look that made my stomach hurt. The first time I put on the full costume with the wig, I locked myself in his bathroom for 20 minutes trying to make everything look right. The dress fit weird, and the wig felt hot and itchy on my head, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself at all. I came out and he just stared at me without saying anything for so long I thought I'd done something wrong. Then tears started running down his face, actual crying, and he kept saying I was perfect, that I was finally perfect, over and over while he touched the wig and the dress like he couldn't believe they were real. I felt sick standing there in this costume while he cried, but I smiled anyway because his happiness seemed like the only thing keeping our relationship from falling apart completely. He took probably 50 pictures of me from every angle, and I had to hold poses while he adjusted the cape or fixed the wig, and the whole time I felt like I was watching someone else's life happen, instead of living my own. He started giving me instructions during intimate moments after that, telling me exactly how to move and what position to be in, and what phrases I needed to say. Frozen always played on his TV now, and he'd pause it at specific songs and wait for me to sing along while we were together. If I forgot words or moved the wrong way, he'd stop everything and make me start over from the beginning like we were rehearsing for some play I never agreed to be in. I learned to let my mind float up and away during those times, like I was stuck on the ceiling watching some girl who looked like me do whatever he wanted while my real self hid somewhere safe inside my head. I'd hear my voice singing about letting go and being free, and the words felt like some cruel joke because I wasn't free at all. I was trapped in this performance I couldn't escape from. In August, I finally told him I needed space, that things had gotten too intense and I wanted to slow down and maybe take a break. He immediately started crying and grabbed my hands, begging me not to leave him, saying I was the only good thing in his life. Then his crying turned into anger, and he yelled about how much he'd done for me, how he'd been so patient with my hair not being right, and me not trying hard enough to be what he needed. Then he cried again and said his parents destroyed everything they touched, and now I was destroying him too, that I was killing him by leaving. He talked for 2 hours, switching between begging and anger and crying, and by the end I felt so tired and guilty and confused that I couldn't remember why I'd wanted to leave in the first place. I stayed because I was 18, and nobody had ever taught me that someone else's pain wasn't mine to fix. He promised everything would get better once college started, that he'd just been stressed about his parents and the future, that he loved me so much it scared him sometimes. I believed him because I needed to believe that all the hair damage and costume wearing and singing meant something, that I hadn't given up pieces of myself for nothing. He held me gently that night and whispered that he'd try harder, and I fell asleep thinking maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe this was just normal relationship stuff that everyone went through. September brought new rules I didn't recognize as rules because he framed them as caring about me. He needed to know where I was all the time, who I was with, what I was doing, and if I didn't text back within 5 minutes, he'd call repeatedly until I answered. He'd ask what I was wearing before I left the house and suggest I change if my clothes weren't what he preferred. He wanted me to send pictures throughout the day so he could see me, and if I forgot, he'd get quiet and withdrawn until I apologized. I started checking my phone every few seconds because the anxiety of missing his messages felt worse than just responding immediately to everything. He made comments about my body that felt like observations but landed like criticism. He'd mentioned that I looked like I'd gained weight, or that certain friends were bad influences, or that my clothes when I wasn't with him didn't match the style he liked. Nothing direct enough to call mean, just little remarks that left me feeling wrong and ugly and like I was constantly disappointing him. I started second-guessing every choice I made, wondering if my outfit would upset him, or if eating lunch would make me look fat, or if talking to certain friends would cause problems later. In October, almost a year into our relationship, he called me over to his apartment with this excited, nervous energy I hadn't seen in weeks. He kept looking at his phone and smiling, then looking at me like he was waiting for something. Finally, he turned his phone toward me and said he'd been working on something special, that he wanted to show me our future together. My stomach dropped before I even saw the screen, some instinct warning me that whatever he was about to show me would change something I couldn't change back. The Pinterest board was labeled Our Future Family in careful letters, and when I started scrolling, I felt like I was falling through the floor. Hundreds of pins filled the screen, all showing the same thing over and over. Blonde children in frozen costumes standing in front of ice castle birthday cakes. Nurseries painted pale blue with snowflake decals covering every wall. Family photos where everyone had platinum hair and light eyes and pale skin, all dressed in coordinating ice princess outfits. Every single image showed the same perfect Nordic aesthetic, the same fantasy family where everyone looked like they'd stepped out of the movie he loved. I kept scrolling and the pins just kept coming. Page after page of his perfect blonde future, and nowhere in any of it did I see myself or anyone who looked like me with my dark hair and brown eyes. I scrolled through the board, and each swipe down made the room tilt sideways like I was standing on a boat deck in rough water. Articles about genetics filled the screen, explaining how eye color worked and which genes were dominant, and how 2 brown-eyed parents could never have a blue-eyed child without help. He'd saved research about Scandinavian adoption agencies that specialized in placing blonde, light-eyed children with American families. There were links to gender selection clinics that promised you could choose not just the sex of your baby, but influence other traits too if you had enough money and were willing to do the procedures. Baby name lists appeared over and over, always the same 3 names at the top with little heart emojis next to them. Elsa for a girl, Anna for a second girl, Kristoff for a boy if they ever had one. He'd organized everything into neat little folders labeled house plans and future kids and family aesthetic, like he was putting together a business presentation about our life. I kept scrolling because I couldn't stop, my thumb moving on autopilot while my brain tried to catch up with what I was seeing. He sat next to me on his couch watching my face the whole time, his eyes tracking every change in my expression, like he was trying to read my thoughts through my skin. He reached over and took the phone from my hands, holding it between us so we could both see the screen. He started talking about how he'd been planning our future, how he'd thought about every detail of what our life would look like together. His voice had this excited edge to it, like he was sharing good news, like he expected me to be happy about all this research he'd done behind my back. He swiped to a pin showing a house with pale blue siding and white trim, all the shutters painted to look like ice crystals. He tapped the screen and told me this was the house we'd have, that he'd already calculated how much we'd need to save for the down payment. He showed me pictures of nurseries with snowflake decals covering every wall, cribs shaped like sleighs, mobiles with little frozen characters dangling above where our babies would sleep. He pointed to family photos he'd saved where everyone wore matching outfits in shades of blue and white, all the kids with platinum hair and pale skin. He kept saying, "This is who we'll become," like it was already decided. Like I'd agreed to this plan I'd never even heard about until right now. I heard myself say something about my hair and eyes, how our kids wouldn't look like the pictures he'd saved because I had dark features, and genetics didn't work the way he seemed to think they did. The words came out quiet and confused, like I was asking a question instead of stating a fact. He got this patient look on his face, The kind of expression you'd use with a little kid who didn't understand something simple. He set the phone down on the coffee table and turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. He explained that's what all the research was for, that there were ways to make sure we got the right outcome. He talked about the gender selection clinics and how they could screen embryos for certain traits before implanting them. He mentioned adoption as a backup plan, showed me the agencies he'd bookmarked that worked with Scandinavian countries where everyone had the coloring he wanted. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing what color to paint a room instead of planning how to engineer our future children to match his fantasy. His thumbs rubbed circles on the backs of my hands while he talked, this gentle touch that didn't match the scary things coming out of his mouth. Something clicked in my head right then, this sudden awful understanding that made my whole body go cold. He'd never been looking at me at all. Every time he stared at my face or touched my hair or took those hundreds of pictures, he wasn't seeing me, the actual person sitting in front of him. He was looking through me at some ice princess fantasy he'd built in his mind, and I was just the girl-shaped space he was trying to force into that image. Everything made sense now in this horrible way. The constant requests to lighten my hair weren't about making me prettier. They were about erasing who I actually was. The costume wasn't a fun couples thing. It was a uniform he needed me to wear, so he could pretend I was someone else. The way he scripted our intimate moments and made me sing those songs, he was directing a performance where I played a character he'd written. The control over my clothes and my schedule and who I talked to, all of it was about transforming me into someone I wasn't, and never could be. I was just the wrong-colored raw material he was trying to reshape into his perfect blonde family. That night, I went home and sat at my laptop for 3 hours looking up everything he'd been researching. I found the gender selection clinics he'd bookmarked, places that charged $50,000 and up to let you choose your baby's sex and screen embryos for genetic traits. The websites talked about eye color and hair color like they were options you could pick from a menu. I clicked through to the adoption agencies he'd saved, all of them specializing in placing children from Norway and Sweden and Denmark with American families. They had whole galleries of blonde kids waiting for homes, their photos sorted by age and gender like you were shopping for a product. I found genetic counseling services that would analyze both parents' DNA and tell you the probability of having a child with specific features. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, building this whole detailed blueprint for how to construct his perfect frozen family. Every pin on that board represented hours of research, careful planning, systematic thinking about how to make his fantasy real. I started noticing things I'd been too close to see before, little details that suddenly looked different now that I understood what he was really doing. He never used my actual name during intimacy, never whispered it or said it at the important moments. He called me baby or beautiful, or sometimes just made sounds, but my name never came out of his mouth when we were together. A few times I'd thought I heard him whisper Elsa so quietly, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. But now I knew I probably hadn't imagined it at all. Every single photo he'd taken of me over the past year had been edited somehow. I went through my phone and found dozens of pictures where my hair looked lighter than it really was, my eyes more blue-green than brown, my skin tone pale and cool instead of warm. He'd been using filters and editing apps to transform my face in pictures, creating this version of me that looked more like what he wanted. Even the photos he'd post on social media were all edited to make me look different, to make me match his aesthetic. A few days later, I was at his apartment and he left his computer open on his desk while he went to make us dinner. I wasn't trying to snoop, but I saw a folder labeled with my name, and I clicked on it before I could think about whether I should. The folder had hundreds of photos inside, all of them pictures of me that he'd edited in ways that made my stomach hurt. My face was photoshopped onto bodies wearing frozen costumes, the edits good enough that it really looked like me in those ice blue dresses. He'd turned my brown hair platinum white in every single image, changed my eye color to bright blue, made my skin so pale I looked sick. Some of the photos were ones I recognized from dates we'd been on, or times we'd hung out with friends, my face carefully edited and pasted into different contexts. Others were pictures I'd never seen before, images he must have taken without me knowing and then altered to match his fantasy. There were hundreds of them, this whole secret collection of me as someone else, me transformed into the character he wanted me to be instead of the person I actually was. The next time we were together, he pinned my wrists above my head like he'd done before, but this time his grip was so tight I couldn't move at all even when I tried. His fingers pressed into the bones of my wrists hard enough to hurt, hard enough to leave marks I'd see for days after. He held my arms stretched up against his headboard and stared down at my face while Frozen played on his TV. He told me to sing along with Let It Go, and I started singing because I knew what happened if I didn't. But this time while I sang, I watched his face and saw that he wasn't looking at me, wasn't seeing me at all. His eyes had this distant, focused look like he was seeing something else entirely, something he'd created in his own mind. I was just the body underneath him, just the voice singing the words he wanted to hear. But the person he was with in his head wasn't me. He was somewhere else with someone else, and I was just the stand-in playing the part. I stopped singing halfway through the song, just stopped making sound even though his grip on my wrist got tighter. He noticed immediately and his whole face changed, his expression going from that distant, dreamy look to something sharp and angry that I'd never seen before. He told me I was ruining it, that I never tried hard enough to give him what he needed. He said I was selfish for not doing this one simple thing that made him happy, that other girls would be grateful to have someone care about them the way he cared about me. His voice got louder and his hands squeezed my wrists, so hard I made a sound I didn't mean to make. I started singing again because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't, and the second I started the words again, his face changed back like flipping a switch. He smiled like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just been angry, like everything was perfect now that I was performing correctly again. That night after he drove me home, I sat on my bed and decided I had to leave him. Not eventually, not after we talked about things, not after I tried harder to be what he wanted. I needed to leave immediately, as soon as I could figure out how to do it safely. He'd built this entire fantasy future around controlling who I was, around transforming me into a character from a movie, and I finally understood that no amount of trying would ever be enough, because I could never actually become the person he wanted. I was always going to have dark hair and brown eyes and features that didn't match his ice princess dream. I could bleach my hair until it fell out and wear the costume every day and sing the songs perfectly, but I would still be me underneath all of it, and me was never going to be enough for what he wanted. I started planning in secret how to get out, figuring out how to extract myself from someone who'd wrapped his whole identity around this fantasy that required me to stop being myself. I told my parents I needed to stay with my aunt for a while because she had a job opportunity for me at her office. I told him I needed a week apart to focus on college applications that were due soon. I said it calm and normal, like it was just temporary, like I'd be back in 7 days and everything would go back to how it was. He looked confused, but he nodded and said he understood, that he wanted me to focus on my future. I packed a bag with just enough clothes that it looked like a short trip, nothing that would make him suspicious. Then I waited until 2 in the morning when I knew he'd be asleep, and I went back to my room and grabbed everything that actually mattered. My laptop and my phone charger and the few photos I had from before I met him, back when I still looked like myself. I threw garbage bags full of clothes into my trunk, all the things I'd owned before he started choosing my outfits. I took my books and my old journals and a stuffed animal I'd had since I was 6. I left behind every piece of silver jewelry, every item of clothing he'd bought me, the frozen costume shoved in the back of my closet, all of it. My hands shook so hard I could barely grip my car keys, but I got in and I drove 3 hours to my aunt's house without stopping once. He called 67 times that first day. I counted them because I couldn't stop staring at my phone, watching his name appear over and over on the screen. The texts started coming in floods, so many that my phone kept buzzing in my hand like it was vibrating apart. The first ones were confused, asking where I was and why I wasn't answering. Then they got angry, saying I was being dramatic and childish and he deserved an explanation. Then they turned heartbroken, long paragraphs about how much he loved me and how he couldn't live without me, and please just tell him what he did wrong. Then they got scary, telling me I couldn't just leave him like this, that I owed him more than running away, that he knew where my aunt lived, and he could come get me if I didn't come back on my own. Then they swung back to loving again, promising he'd change and we could work through whatever was wrong and he'd do anything to make me happy. I blocked his number after reading the one where he said he was driving to my aunt's house right now. I blocked him on every social media platform I had, deleted apps off my phone so I couldn't check them. I called my parents and told them not to tell him where I was, that I needed space and they had to promise not to give him my aunt's address. My mom sounded worried, but she agreed, and my dad just said okay, in this flat voice that meant he didn't understand, but he wouldn't argue. My aunt let me stay in her guest room and I cried for 2 weeks straight. Not pretty crying, the kind where you can't breathe and your whole body hurts and you make sounds you didn't know you could make. She didn't ask questions, just brought me food I didn't eat and sat with me when the crying got so bad I was scared I'd choke. I cut my damaged blonde hair short with kitchen scissors at 2 in the morning, hacking it off in chunks until it was barely past my ears. My aunt found me in the bathroom surrounded by piles of dead blonde hair, and she just cleaned it up and took me to her hairdresser friend the next day to fix what I'd destroyed. I dyed it back to dark brown, my natural color I hadn't seen in almost a year. I threw away every piece of silver jewelry in the gas station dumpster on the way back from the salon. I went through every item of clothing he'd chosen, and I stuffed it all in garbage bags and left them on the curb for trash pickup. Everything that reminded me of who he'd tried to make me become went into those bags, and I watched the garbage truck take it all away on Thursday morning. A month later, my mom called and said he was dating someone new, a girl from the next town over who had natural platinum blonde hair and bright blue eyes. My mom said it like it was proof I'd overreacted. Like, see, he moved on fine, so it couldn't have been that serious what you went through. She said the girl was really pretty and seemed sweet, and wasn't it good that he was happy now? I hung up on her and threw my phone across the room so hard it cracked the screen. I started community college near my aunt's house that fall and tried to build a life that felt like mine. But I'd have panic attacks in movie theaters if I heard Frozen music playing in the previews. And I couldn't let anyone touch my hair without feeling sick, not even my aunt when she tried to brush it out of my face. I went on one date that year with a guy from my English class, and I left in the middle of dinner when he tried to hold my hand across the table. My aunt suggested therapy when she found me having a breakdown in the bathroom after seeing a Frozen toy at the grocery store. I'd been doing okay, just buying milk and bread, and then I turned down the toy aisle by accident, and there was a whole display of Elsa dolls. I sat on the bathroom floor for an hour, unable to stop shaking, and my aunt had to come get me because I couldn't drive home. She made an appointment with Chase, who specialized in helping people who'd survived controlling relationships. He was the first person who said what happened to me had a name, that it wasn't just me being too sensitive or dramatic like my mom implied. In therapy, I learned words like coercive control and identity erosion and trauma bonding. Chase explained how abuse doesn't always look like violence, how the most effective control is the kind that makes you question whether anything bad happened at all. He said what my ex did was methodical and calculated, that the Pinterest board proved he'd been planning my transformation for months before I even knew what was happening. I spent my first year of therapy just trying to accept that it wasn't my fault, that I didn't lead him on by going to see Frozen that first time, that I wasn't responsible for his obsession just because I tried to make him happy. That leaving didn't make me a bad person, even though he'd texted me hundreds of times saying I'd destroyed his life. Some days I believed what Chase told me, most days I didn't. Chase's wife Isabel was a hairstylist who specialized in repairing damaged hair, and Chase suggested I see her about fixing the chemical damage from all the bleaching. She worked in a small salon that smelled like lavender, and she touched my hair so gently I started crying in her chair. She never asked why my hair was so destroyed or what had happened to make it fall out in patches. She just fixed it with patient kindness, doing treatments every week for months until it started growing back healthy. I cried every single appointment, and she just handed me tissues and kept working. I joined a support group for people who'd survived controlling relationships, meeting every Tuesday night in a church basement. Hearing other people's stories helped me understand mine wasn't unique, that there was a pattern to how these things happened. I met Rowan there, a guy my age who'd gotten out of a relationship where his girlfriend had controlled everything he wore and ate and said. He became the first friend I'd made in 2 years who knew the truth about my past, who didn't need me to explain why certain songs made me leave rooms or why I couldn't watch Disney movies anymore. By my second year of therapy, I was functional enough to move into my own apartment, a studio on the 3rd floor of a building near downtown where I could walk to work. The apartment had white walls and hardwood floors and windows that let in actual sunlight, and I picked out every piece of furniture myself without anyone telling me what would look better or fit the aesthetic. I bought a purple couch because I liked purple, hung abstract art that meant nothing to anyone but me, and kept my hair short and dyed it whatever color felt right that week. The junior graphic designer position at a small marketing firm paid enough to cover rent and therapy and groceries, and my boss liked my work enough to give me real projects instead of just filing and coffee runs. I was rebuilding myself piece by piece, figuring out who I was when no one was telling me who to be, and some days I actually recognized the person looking back at me in the mirror. I started dating again carefully, running away at the first sign of someone being too interested in changing my appearance or controlling my choices. A guy from the coffee shop near my apartment asked me out, and I said yes. But when he suggested I'd look pretty with longer hair on our second date, I never answered his texts again. Another guy I met through work seemed nice until he started asking detailed questions about where I was and who I was with, and I blocked his number that same night. I went through a phase of dyeing my hair every color except blonde, purple 1 month and pink the next, and then blue with teal tips, like I was proving to myself that I got to choose and no one else got a vote. My coworkers thought it was fun and creative, and I let them think that instead of explaining, I was reclaiming something that had been taken from me. I dated a woman for 3 months who had tattoos and rode a motorcycle and never once commented on my appearance, except to say she liked whatever made me happy. And when it ended because she was moving to another state for work, we stayed friends because she'd never tried to own me. 3 years after leaving, I thought I was doing okay. I had my own place that felt like mine, a job I liked where people respected my work, friends who knew my story and didn't judge me for it, and a therapist who'd helped me understand what happened without making me feel broken. I still had bad days where I couldn't watch anything Disney-related without feeling sick, where certain songs on the radio made me have to pull over, and breathe through panic attacks, where I saw couples with matching aesthetics, and wondered if the woman was trapped like I'd been. But I also had good ones where I laughed with coworkers over lunch, where I created designs I was proud of, where I went on dates that ended nicely without anyone trying to script my behavior, where I looked at my purple couch and rainbow hair and felt like I'd won something back. That felt like progress. Like maybe someday the good days would outnumber the bad ones, and I'd stop waiting for someone to tell me I was doing it wrong. Then yesterday, a mutual friend from high school posted a photo and tagged him in it. Just a casual group shot from someone's backyard party, and I clicked before I could stop myself like my finger had a mind of its own. His Instagram was public, easy to see, his perfect life on display for everyone who wanted to look, and I scrolled through months of photos while my coffee got cold on the table beside me. There was his Instagram with hundreds of posts showing his perfect life, the life he'd been planning on that Pinterest board, the life I'd escaped becoming part of. I should have closed the app right then, should have blocked him and moved on, but I kept scrolling like I was watching a car accident I couldn't look away from. The wedding photos from 6 months ago showed him, and someone named Maddie according to the captions, the natural blonde he'd started dating a month after I left, based on what my mom had told me years ago. She wore an ice blue wedding dress that looked like it came straight from a costume shop, and her platinum hair was done in an elaborate braid over one shoulder, exactly like the character's signature style. Their baby daughter appeared in photos from the past few months, maybe 4 months old based on the captions marking her monthly milestones, and she had wispy white blonde hair and pale skin, and was named Elsa, according to every single post. The nursery photos showed snowflake wallpaper and ice castle decorations, and a mobile with characters from the movie hanging over the crib. Every photo was color-coordinated in blues and whites and silvers. Every caption referenced the movie or used quotes from the songs. Every image showed the exact future he'd pinned on that board he'd shown me 3 years ago. I sit on my couch now looking at these photos of his perfect fantasy life, with someone who was born matching his vision, and I feel this complicated mess of emotions I can't untangle no matter how hard I try. Relief that I got out before I became this, before I was trapped in that ice blue wedding dress with a baby named after a cartoon character, and my whole life color coordinated to match someone else's obsession. Grief for who I was before him, the girl who thought being chosen by the golden boy meant winning something instead of losing herself piece by piece. Anger that he faces no consequences, that he got exactly what he wanted with someone who fit the vision from the start, that my mom was right that he moved on fine like what he did to me didn't matter. And this terrible knowledge that Maddie might be living the future he'd planned for me, that maybe she's trapped like I was, and just doesn't know it yet, or she might be exactly what he wanted all along, and I was just the failed audition, the girl who didn't fit the costume no matter how hard he tried to make me. I call Chase and leave a message that I need an emergency session, my voice shaking as I explain I saw his Instagram. And I'm not doing well. Then I close the app and try to remember that surviving was enough even if it doesn't feel like winning.